Good evening. Garbage figures prominently in tonight's programming, both from the GVRD and from Fleet Street, the mecca of all daily newspapers in London, England. But first, here's Ted with the rundown.
The end of Fleet Street was in sight until the stranglehold by their unions was broken. Now the press has bounced back with royals, sex, and scandals. 3 London editors say Fleet Street is alive and thriving, and they're coming up with Webster. And from Fleet Street to Granville Street, can the urban decay of Granville Mall be turned around? Alderman Jonathan Baker has all the answers and talks with Webster as they walk the mall. But first, who will take our garbage? The Greater Vancouver Regional District has to get rid of 300,000 tons of excess garbage every year, and interior residents are worried they'll get it. In the studio with Webster, Doug MacKay, Regional Manager of the GVRD.
It's 1 million tons, as I just found out, but the reason that Doug MacKay is on the program tonight is I'm being bombarded with protests from residents in the Caribou. From Clinton to Ashcroft to Cash Creek to Costa Siding, they're fearful, some of them, that several 100,000 tons of garbage from the GVRD is about to be dumped on their communities with what they regard as the attendant problems of solid waste disposal. Doug MacKay is the manager of the GVRD. Now, Doug, first of all, give me the straight facts. How much garbage do you have to dispose of a year?
Well, we have about 1 million tons of solid waste in the GVRD, and the municipalities need to deal with that. They've been dealing with it for years, and they look now to the GVRD to dispose of that.
Just tell me where you dispose of 1 million tons of garbage.
Well, Jack, we've done a lot of work in the last number of years, and we filed with the Waste Management Branch and the Minister a waste management plan the end of 1985, and we've got a number of facilities that we're using now and a number others that are under construction. We're using Burns Bog landfill. We're using the landfill in the North Shore. We've got a big incinerator under construction in Burnaby. We have a resource recovery plant starting in Coquitlam, and we're using a landfill in Surrey. Those are the facilities we have now.
Now, that's 225,000 tons in that incinerator a year when it goes?
That's right, that's right.
Have you facilities enough to dispose of the Greater Vancouver Regional District's garbage in this area, down on the Lower Mainland, without going anywhere else?
Yes, we do. The plan we've put together has provided for disposal of all of the refuse from the GVRD for the next 10 years.
So for 10 years, on the face of it, you don't have to dump any garbage in the Caribou?
We don't have to, but refuse is an ever-growing problem, and one of our commitments is to continue to find additional projects. We have to do that, because not only will some of the projects we're using now be phased out over time, but the quantities are going to increase. So we're continually looking for additional projects, and the ones you're talking about have some advantages to us if they happen.
Let's spell them out. There are 2 companies operating to attempt to get the proper governmental permits. One is Continental. Mm-hmm. That's looking at Costa Siding near Clinton.
Right.
And the other is GSX looking at Cash Creek.
Exactly.
Now, just so that people in the Caribou understand, these 2 commercial operations, if they got, either one of them got what was due, the appropriate, proper local and government permission, would you then consider using their facilities to dump garbage up there?
Absolutely. One of the other things that is an essential requirement of the GVRD, and our board has confirmed it, is that anything that is used for disposal outside of the boundaries of the GVRD would need to have demonstrated local acceptance. And
all the
that's
way.
A requirement.
If it was locally accepted by the council and that regional district, I presume.
Well, whatever the jurisdiction is, the contract or the tender we put out required acceptance by the local jurisdiction. In the case of Cash Creek, the project is within the village, and the village has actually applied for the permit for the landfill.
And there the council has approved it?
The council has approved it, and not only that, but this project has been talked about, has been right up front since last spring. There was a municipal election in Cash Creek, as everywhere else, in November, and the council went back in 2 changes, and they're totally supportive. Now, so presumably the community also supports it.
All right, if that community wants it, and is properly legally demonstrated, and if you approve of the commercial operator, you would, even though you can dispose of your 1 million tons here, you would say, ha-ha, we'll give you a contract to take some of it.
Yes, because
How
we're
much?
looking for the maximum flexibility, about 200,000 tons per year. That's what we've talked
So
about.
you actually put out a tender saying anybody who's got the proper approval, environmental, to get rid of 200 tons of our garbage a year. Did you then promise to run the stuff up?
No, what we said is that we would provide that refuse within the GVRD, and we didn't limit it to landfills, we didn't limit it to this region or anywhere else. We looked for incineration projects, composting projects, landfill projects, whatever the industry could offer us, that we're interested in developing additional projects.
Now, therefore, it's to the interest of either of these companies to get that proper approval, and then they can go into business, either one of them or both of them.
Or both of them, if they both had a project and the costs were acceptable to the GVRD, then I would be in a position to recommend to the board that we go.
How do you get involved in the cost? Don't they come and pick it up?
Yes, but they charge us for it.
They charge you 200,000 tons. What about all these empty trucks coming back on the highway?
Well, that's the key to the Cache Creek project, and I think that's why the village is in favor of it, because part of it, an integral part of that project, is a wood chipping plant at Cache Creek, provide a fair amount of employment in the area, and those wood chips need to be transported to the coast. They come down in the truck, and the refuse goes back in the truck.
So therefore, if any community wants it in Caribou at the moment, it would seem that Cache Creek has an edge because of the local approval within the council.
It appears that way, and it appears because of the arrangements with the backhaul, it appears that they have the better cost arrangement as well.
Now, as far as a cost of siting is concerned, that top one is GSX, is it?
Yes.
Something to do with Genstar.
That was Genstar's waste management, the arm of Genstar that looked after their solid waste facilities, and Genstar has changed ownership, and I understand it's now owned by the previous management of the waste disposal.
Right now, Clinton is Continental.
Continental
Tex
Environmental Systems. Tex is the president of Continental, yes.
And what they're trying to do is to gather their forces to get the same kind of approval to come to you and respond to your tender of 200,000 tons a year.
Exactly, and they've identified a site and they have applied for a permit.
Now, as I understand your broad picture, you can dispose right now with incineration and your various Burns bog things and offshore landfills, you can dispose of the whole 1 million tons.
Right, we've gone through that, and there were all kinds of compromises made by all of the 15 municipalities within the region, and our plans in place, and we have a home for all of the refuse.
But at the same time, looking to the future, you are now prepared to put out your tender, and if everything can be okayed by Rogers and the environmentalists and the councils and the regional districts and whatnot, you would say, okay, come and pick up 200,000 tons of Vancouver's garbage.
That would give us a nice little bit of flexibility in our plan, another disposal point, and you can't have too many places to dispose of refuse.
It seems kind of odd dumping it in the Caribou, but why not? Now, it wouldn't be a moneymaker for you, but you would...
Actually, the costs are, the tendered prices by GSX were substantially the same as our regional costs will be when all of our facilities are in place, the incinerator and the resource recovery plant and the
All
others.
right, as I say, I've got stuff from the Ministry of Environment, Caribou Clean Air and Water. I've got stuff from the industrial, what's the name of this one? John McCandless's outfit.
Oh, yes,
Interior
the
Waste Management Committee,
Committee,
Chairman of the Provincial Hazardous Waste Management Coalition. Is any of your stuff hazardous waste?
Absolutely not. This is municipal refuse, and it's not hazardous waste. That's a different subject altogether.
That's a different
and
caper.
that's clearly
This
a
is
provincial
good
responsibility.
old-fashioned,
Good
safe,
old-fashioned
cardboard,
garbage.
old refrigerators and things?
All of that material is by and large removed in the resource recovery plant. And,
All
but
right,
it's municipal refuse, what you put out at the back and what the other people put
If
out.
Cache Creek and our Costa Siding, which is in Clinton, came up with a deal with these various free enterprises, when would you start to ship surplus, some of your 200,000 tons of your garbage to a spot or spots in the interior?
If they could put it together, and if I think we would be in a position any time this year to start moving into that kind of an operation, would help us all.
Well, as I say, I've been covered with phone calls and documents, most of which I haven't got time to go all the way through, which is why I asked you to come here to explain the whole thing. And I don't know if this will result in a flood of garbage phone calls. It may well do from the interior. And I know I'm going to get one from a Clinton woman who's in town right now, came all the way just because I mentioned it on air after the break. Here's the woman from Clinton, isn't it? Go ahead, Vera.
Hi, Doug. Some questions that I have to ask is number one, no garbage is safe garbage, and it just stuns me to hear somebody sit there and say good, clean garbage, because we know that it doesn't matter what, it's toxic and the leachate and all of that we know. But are you prepared to follow the guidelines of the model dump? The other thing is, has these companies that you're going to contract this out to, who's going to be responsible for this?
Okay, two questions there. She's asking you if it's toxic.
It's not toxic in the sense that the garbage itself is toxic. The leachate that comes out of landfill is generally considered to be toxic. It needs to be handled, needs to be treated, or whatever.
Now, what about, are you prepared to follow the guidelines for the model dump, or is that somebody else's responsibility?
No, absolutely. That model landfill was developed by the GVRD as part of the Lower Mainland Refuse Project, and the requirement of our contract is that the operator operates the landfill to fulfill the objectives of a model landfill, and part of the tender document includes a dissertation of what a model landfill
But basically, you're merely supplying the garbage, and the Ministry of Environment has got to monitor what they do.
The Ministry of Environment issues the permit, and they do the monitoring.
Hold on, Vera, I'll come back to you again. But it must take some others. Go ahead, please.
Hi. My question for your guest is, have there been any studies done on retrieving an actual fact gas and fuel oil can be produced from garbage?
Is that esoteric?
Not really, because there's a gas recovery project going on right now at the landfill in Richmond, the one that's owned by the Harbour Commission, and that gas is being recovered, and I think it's being marketed. We're recovering gas from the old landfill in Coquitlam, but we're simply flaring it off. As far as production of oil, I don't think that that's a practical alternative.
Fair enough. Go ahead, please.
Hello?
Yes?
Yeah, I'd like to know if, for that Clinton siding site, if BC Rail will be shipping it up, and if it's the siding on BC Rail?
Yes, the Coster siding is siding on BC Rail, and the original proposal was that the refuse would be baled here and shipped up by rail. But since that time, Continental has changed the concept and are now proposing to haul it up by truck trailer.
But they don't have the backfill with the chips.
But they don't have the backhaul with the chips. But
Go
that's
ahead,
their
please.
proposal.
Yes, Jack, your guest mentioned that there was an area in Coquitlam designated for a landfill. Can he tell me exactly where that will be?
Yes, it's not a landfill, it's a resource recovery plant, and the exact location is on King Edward Avenue in the Crown Forest property.
You mean that's where you sort it out?
That's where the refuse would be delivered, sorted out, processed, yes.
Thank you. Go ahead from 100 Mile House.
Yes, hello, Jack.
Yes.
Yes, I'm in 100 Mile House, and I was told that, and I saw a diagram of how the dump is situated over a watershed area. Now, it said that should there be more than 2 inches of rain during the summer at any given time, that would be sufficient enough to cause seepage or whatever into the watershed, which will drain through successive different creeks into Bridge Creek, and our water supply comes out of there, you know?
Okay, do you know anything about that?
No, we haven't examined the hydrology there. That is being done under the permit approval process by the Ministry of Environment.
Well, but their responsibility.
They're responsible and
Go ahead, please.
Yes, Jack, for Mr. MacKay, when he mentioned the fact that it had gone to the municipality election, the people in Cache Creek, and I am from Cache Creek, but in Vancouver right now, we didn't know anything about it until there was a public meeting held after, but there was nothing discussed at our municipality election. And we're really not in favor, from what I understand, of our people.
Well, it's up to you to kick up a row up there.
We're kicking it up. we're also asking the fact that if we don't get the land dump, we also have to have the chip plant at the same time.
And you don't like either?
Well, from what I understand for our people of Cache Creek, no, we're not really in favor of anything, but our council says we're going to get it. We're being held up for both.
That's not your problem, Doug, is it?
Not really, and I find that hard to understand because there were no secrets about the project as far back as last July.
Go ahead, please.
Hello. I would like to ask if, I sound like a dreamer, but could we be better citizens and sort our own, cans, bottles?
We only do that in wartime.
Could we not do that? My mother was born here 87 years ago, and I've been here 62 years. I just wondered, could we help defray the costs for Greater Vancouver?
Yes, you certainly could, and an integral part of the GVRD plan is recycling. We put a lot of effort into recycling, but it's a fact that at this moment, only newspaper and cardboard are economic to recycle. We're looking really hard at glass and cans, and there is a lot people can do by sorting their garbage. Most municipalities now have a separate pickup, at least for paper, and people sure can cooperate.
Go ahead from 70 Mile House.
Hello, Mr. MacKay.
Hello.
You keep referring to this dump as in Clinton, and actually it's just out of 70 Mile House, and nobody's mentioned that we're part of a large aquifer system in this area, which this is sitting on.
That's the same answer, though.
The same answer to that.
You elected a government which put a cabinet minister in charge, and he's a minister of environment. You've got all kinds of people. He wants to get rid of properly, safely, and efficiently 200,000 tons of garbage a year. Rogers is the guy I've got to talk to about that. Thank you. Go ahead from Victoria.
Yes, Jack. It's about the ballast out of the fluorescent bulbs.
The what?
The ballast in the fluorescent bulbs are full of PCBs, and the Victoria garbage dump's just full of them. I got it from a lot of...
Is that a problem for you at all, Mr. MacKay?
Well, I've never seen it identified as a major problem, but there are all kinds of things that are disposed of that have minute quantities of this and that, and they all end up in the landfill, and that's why the leachate...
You can hardly go through and pick out every broken...
No. PCBs, the carcinogenic.
And that's why...
That gets into the fish.
I know.
All the rivers, it'll leach down, and he knows it.
And that's exactly why any landfill requires a leachate collection system, and there should be nothing leave the site.
Now I'll go back to Vera again. Vera, have you any other questions you want to ask him?
Well, I think by now it's pretty obvious to all of us that garbage is not safe, and I think we can play this little game and say, it's okay, but I think as human beings, we've got to look at an alternative, and the alternative doesn't seem to be suddenly giving somebody a permit and starting to fill up holes with garbage in September. There's not enough time to do the proper things as far as the model dump is concerned, and there's not enough time to get a social economic study done on these different communities to know what the dump will do and won't do, and I think that the GVRD should hold back until these things are done, and they know perfectly well that these things cannot be done in a case of 4 or 5 months.
Okay, Doug?
Well, I'm not sure that a socioeconomic study in the area of either Coster Siding or Cache Creek is a responsibility of the GVRD. If it were within our area, then we would undertake those kinds of studies.
You're telling me that if neither of these places produce the proper approval, you will dispose of the garbage down here for the foreseeable future?
Exactly.
You can't blame him for that, ma'am. You've got to go after the Ministry of Environment. He has 1 million tons of garbage a year.
Well, true, except that I think that we should go after the Ministry of Environment. And the thing is that the thing is when these recommendations go in from all the information that's been gathered at all these informal meetings that they've had, when that goes over to Victoria, to the Ministry of Environment, we have no guarantee that those things will go on the permit. He will give the permit, and they are not compelled to give a permit.
Well, ma'am, that's his responsibility. I promised to explain it out to you tonight, the details. I'm glad I did. I think I've spelled out very clearly what the prospects are. Cache Creek is apparently unified on the subject. If either of these places comes up with the proper ministerial permits and can respond to the tender for 200,000 tons of garbage a year, it could start to move with all approvals by 87 or 88.
That's right. If they can do that, then we'll have something we can deal with, and I can take it to my board in a logical and reasonable fashion.
And thank you very much for coming down today, Vera.
Thank you, Jack.
Thank you. Well, that's, I'm telling you, fascinating. What do you do with the steam from the incinerator when you get it going?
We're selling it to Belkin Packaging, and they use it as process steam.
You're selling it now?
Well, as soon as the incinerator won't be working till next
Well,
year.
I've got to tell you,
we've got a contract with Morris Belkin to do exactly that.
I got to tell you something. You're a man who has to handle a million tons of garbage a year. I want total, absolute guarantees that everything from here on, in the past and the future, will be perfect, and I don't want to see any garbage.
Right, and I assume you're going to recycle that paper.
I certainly am. My thanks to Doug MacKay, manager of the GVRD, and I'll be back after the break.
Eastern. Night hockey on TSN.
Of all popular causes in the United Kingdom and throughout the world, Fleet Street. And now that sin is... Fleet Street, in case you didn't know it, is the mecca of journalists from all over the world. Everybody admires the scourge of all popular causes in the United Kingdom and throughout the world, Fleet Street. And now that sin is in again, and houses of ill repute are on page 1 every day, the Fleet Street moguls can ignore for the moment all the fancy dancings of the royal family, be it Prince Wimp, or Duke Andy, or Fergie the Porky, etc. And I am extremely honoured this evening to have in my studio 3 gentlemen who speak to 15 million people at a time, distinguished editors from Fleet Street, London. And the first is Mr. Mr. Lloyd Turner, editor of The Star, world famous for its T&A attitude to life. Is that correct?
That's correct. Fun. Good times.
We won't say tits and what,
no, we
we'll
won't.
just say tits and bums. Is that correct?
No, plenty of good news as well.
And you are the principal purveyor of tits and bums to many of the avid readers in the United Kingdom.
Not the principal purveyor, no. There's a lot of news in the paper as well, but we actually do have Madam Sin under contract. We could bring her over for your program if you like.
We'll come back to Madam Sin in a moment. And here is Robin Esser, which is a much more dignified paper of which he edits, and that is the Sunday Express.
That's correct, Jack.
And you're not, you don't cater for the T&A people, do you?
No, we don't, but of course I'm sure they're members of the same audience.
I said 15 million. You've got a circulation of how many on a Sunday?
We sell well over 2.25 million.
2.25 million.
That's
read
correct.
by many more people than 2.25 million.
Of course so. We go into households and we reckon about 6 million readers.
And here is the man who traditionally is the hardest, toughest newspaper man in Fleet Street, if it hasn't changed that much. Nick Lloyd, editor of The Daily Express.
Hi, nice to meet you.
And you're another middle-of-the-roader.
We're a middle-of-the-road paper which does hard news and a bit of fun too. Madam Sin, you know, got to read about it. You know.
First come to Madam Sin. Please, from your journalistic background, give me a 1-paragraph summary of the attractiveness of Madam Sin, so much so that you have bought her story for your paper.
She said she knew how to give men a good time, to enjoy life, and what can be more better than that?
She was the woman who ran orgies of all kind and strange leather clothing.
Men came in with luncheon vouchers to have a good time. The police inspector who arrested her the first time came back to see her because he wanted to have his own fun with Madam Sin and others. Madam Sin's got a great story to tell, and she's a harmless woman who gave men a lot of pleasure.
How old is Madam Sin?
Well, Madam Sin didn't give the pleasure to herself. It was the women that she had there upstairs. But
How old is Madam Sin?
About 50 years of age. But take off 15 years because she's a young girl at heart.
Tell me, how much have you paid for Madam Sin's sensational story?
£10,000.
That's cheap at the price.
It's very cheap at the price, yes. Well worth it.
Now, you, sir, are one of the principal paparazzi commanders who chase the royal family. Is that correct?
We do follow their every whim and event, yes, up to a point.
How did you handle Prince Wimp?
We didn't call him Prince Wimp.
You didn't?
Some of the rather nastier tabloids called him Prince Wimp. We actually examined his decision to leave the Marines and found out that he wanted to go on to the stage rather than be a husky soldier. We also found out that Prince Philip was not very pleased with this decision and gave him something of a dressing down.
Gave him a dressing down.
And it's remarkable in a way that a member of the royal family these days can actually decide to quit in that situation.
What is the status, Mr. Esser of the Sunday Express, of the royal family and popularity? I mean, from the square days when I was there and nobody did anything wrong and we didn't even know about Tony Blunt, everyone was terribly respectful. Has the public lost its respect for the royal family?
I think as far as the younger members of the family are concerned, possibly so. They've been exposed too much on television. And many of the things that were happening in private are now public knowledge. But there are some members of the royal family that we would never criticise.
Such as?
Notably the Queen Mother, the most popular of all royal figures, the nation's favourite grandmother. And I understand she's quite popular in Canada too, Jack.
Very popular indeed, as is the Queen, as a matter of fact.
Of course, the Queen is another one who really is beyond criticism as far as we are concerned and our readers.
Let's turn seriously for a moment to the newspaper game. When I was there were 13 morning newspapers and Fleet Street was dying. That's 40 years ago. How is Fleet Street doing now?
Pretty healthy. What's happened is that Fleet Street hasn't died. There are still 8 morning newspapers. That the new union agreements, which we've all got, are actually making newspapers profitable again. And in fact, we've had 2 new newspapers in the last year, The Independent and Today. So Fleet Street's flourishing.
You acted for that brutal man, did you not? You worked for that brutal man, Murdoch.
Yes, I worked for Murdoch for 14 years.
And was he not the man who really put the hammer to the print unions?
Murdoch, with great skill, really, set up a shadow factory, put new technology into it, and then got the unions to strike so he could sack them, and then moved the journalists and some newly hired labour into the factory and broke the unions.
You're talking about the Battle of Wapping.
That's right.
Were you proud of your part in the Battle of Wapping, fighting against the British working class who took them 100 years to get off their knees and now they're back down on their knees
I don't
again?
think you can call the printers the British working class. They're earning £50,000 a year. They were probably overmanned by a ratio of 4 to 1, and they resisted every move to new technology of any sort at every stage. They brought about their own downfall.
Now, from a point of view of the kind of senior editor here today, the Sunday Express, still owned by Beaverbrooks, is it?
No, not these days. We're owned by United Newspapers and newly ennobled chairman, Lord Stevens.
Oh, Lord Stevens. He used to be... My brother used to work for United Newspapers. Because he buys the Express Group, does that automatically give him his peerage?
It's not automatic, no. Had to work quite hard and do a few good things as well.
Like Lord Thompson did?
I'm told he did.
Thompson gave large contributions to the Tory party and got his peerage.
That's the rumour that goes around.
Oh, I see. About Stevens too, I suppose.
No, I haven't heard that one.
You haven't heard that one. But tell me, now that Murdoch has broken the backs of the unions, he fired, what, 5,000?
Something over that region, yes.
5,000 out of 6,000.
Yep.
How do you survive now with the unions? Have the unions surrendered and given up all their business of signing the name Mickey Mouse to wage contracts?
A lot of those practices have gone, yes. We now have a dialogue with the unions. They're much more amenable. And I think they're staring reality in the face for the first time in 50 years. But you must always remember that over here, we go into a newspaper and you will see a museum at the front where there's a linotype machine and hot metal. A year ago, we were using those on the Express because the unions wouldn't let us move.
Are they still making good money, but you've managed to pare the numbers of them?
They're making extremely good money, and we do have rather less.
Let's turn to politics for a moment. From the Star, what's your circulation?
1,400,000 a day.
That's a fairly new paper, is it not?
7 years old, yes.
7 years old. Now, you, of course, take a left-wing view of politics.
No, we don't. We take an independent view of politics, straight down the middle. We don't really go for one side or the other, although the last election we did support Mrs Thatcher, and we were right to do so.
Mrs Thatcher, of course, is an anachronism, and it's time she left, surely.
Not at all, not at all. She's a marvellous woman.
You've got to be joking.
Yes, I'm having lunch with her in a fortnight's time. I'll tell her what you said, Jack.
Tell her
yes.
Drew Webster's brother
Right.
Jack said she was an anachronism.
No, I can't agree with that.
I don't think she is at all. I think she's a radical, in fact. And in fact, as I said earlier, the Tory party was known as the party in the olden days of the landed aristocracy. It's now the party of the estate agents. She is a radical within conservative terms.
So it's now, instead of the party of the estate owners, it's the party of the estate agents.
That's right.
But Britain is still riddled, who's best for this, with class distinction. If you don't have the right accent, if you didn't go to the right school, you can't get to the top.
Not really true, Jack, these days. There are a lot of professions that are open, including our own. Many working-class boys made it to the top in journalism. And it's also true in a lot of other occupations as well. Not as class-ridden as people here think it is, but it still exists, and Eton is still a good school.
More with my prominent British newspaper editors after the break. But how do you gentlemen plead to the charge that you sensationalise and everything, and that you just go for the superficial, sensational stuff at the top of a story.
We tell it exactly how it is out there in the streets, how it is out there in the homes. There's a lot of serious news in the popular tabloid press as well, otherwise it wouldn't sell. They're just not comics. I mean, there are other places that produce comics that don't sell newspapers. If you just produce rubbish all the time, you wouldn't have a circulation of 1.4 million.
Well, there could be an intellectual argument about that, but is it not a fact that you and nicked yourself for a lot of money for what is regarded reprehensibly as checkbook journalism?
Yes, checkbook journalism is a very, very much a part of journalism all over the world. This television station pays people to appear on your shows probably sometimes. They do appear on other shows, there's no question about it. Now, you don't call that checkbook journalism, do you?
No, that's merely a professional fee to a professional broadcaster.
Well, so is this
that is not checkbook
fee.
Journalism.
This is a professional fee as well for
It is
somebody.
not.
Provide their time and their experience
All right,
and their
tell
values.
the story. Why was a $25,000 fine on you?
Because it was the brother of the Yorkshire Ripper, who was one of the worst murderers in the history of Europe. And we wanted to find out the truth about this man, why he was like he was, whether other people knew about it.
After he was
his family.
convicted?
Oh, yes, £25,000 we paid. We got criticised for not telling anybody. I said it was nobody else's business but mine and my readers. I didn't want to tell anybody
Who nicked you for the £25,000?
Oh, the press council did us for that.
Oh, it wasn't a contempt of court thing?
No, not at all, no.
It was just people like Robin Esser who used their influence to make sure you were nicked for £25,000.
I didn't weigh in on the other side, but it seemed to be good stuff when I read it. I enjoyed it.
And you would go into checkbook journalism whenever necessary?
I don't find it necessary very often.
I do sometimes.
Oh, what kind of checkbook journalism do you specialise in?
I think that you have to understand that we pay people for biographies, we pay people for autobiographies. If it's history, it's respectable. If you talk about the peccadillos and the affairs of presidents and prime ministers after they're dead, that's history. If you do it when they're alive and you do it in newspapers, that's checkbook journalism. I think the public have a right to know about the feet of clay of some of the people who lead them.
As a matter of fact, you've got a number of feet of clay in Britain, to be specific. Tony Blunt, that very suspicious character who finished up in the palace. Why didn't that cause an explosion in Britain?
It did cause an explosion in Britain, a very big one.
Oh, he's dead now, isn't he?
Yeah. Yes, he's dead. And, of course, he was stripped of his knighthood. He had a knighthood from the Queen, if you remember. And that was taken away from him.
Was he known to be one of those suspected agents for the other side when he was appointed to the palace?
I think the palace didn't know. They claim they didn't know, but maybe they were lying.
Mm-hmm. I suspect the government knew.
The government knew. So somebody lied. Maggie Thatcher was the one who had to break the story.
Maggie Thatcher actually named him.
She named him as the one.
Yes.
Now, let's talk about your industrial situation at the moment. I was in Britain last year, and I'm told that Maggie Thatcher has written off the north and doesn't give a damn for those in the north of England and Scotland. Written them off because she can't help them.
Exaggeration, I would say. She's doing her best to help them. Yet there's 3 million unemployed, which is a lot of unemployed. It is very, very slowly coming down. She believes that we have a long way to go before you get the base of the nation correct and people can get back to jobs. She doesn't believe in creating welfare jobs. She believes in creating real jobs. She's doing that. It's a slow process, and it will take us some years to get it.
But it's brutal. When you close down all these uneconomic mines, or so-called uneconomic mines, and bring in South African coal, the people there are stuck with no jobs forever.
Some of them got £30,000 redundancy and went on world cruises. Others of them have been offered welfare money to move. And the trouble with Britain is it's got a soft belly. There's a welfare state there. You don't have to work. You can get enough money off the state to sit at home. It's not like America and Canada where people are prepared to get up out of their houses and move and go out and find a job. And in Britain, they're not doing it. And Maggie will get them to do it.
So you say if you're a Scotch miner outside Edinburgh or Glasgow and the mine closes, uproot yourself forever and go down and live in the south of England, a non-union job.
I've worked in 5 countries of the world, travelled 10,000 miles to travel to work. Yes, of course they should go to where the work is. There's no reason why they shouldn't.
Is it not merely a question of the sense of the selfishness of the government in the south?
Not at all. I don't agree with that. Mrs Thatcher's got to get the nation working at some stage or other. The industries in the north are the old ones that have
3 million unemployed you have.
Yeah, it's not an ideal situation.
And they tell me that your revenues from the oil only cover your welfare payments in 1 year. Is
That's
that right?
right. That's right. But
is Britain going down the tube?
Certainly not. I think Britain will be around like Fleet Street for a long time to come.
What's going to bring it up the tube? You no longer get your cheap colonial labour or your markets or your trappings of power?
I think the sort of realism that Mrs Thatcher is putting into the nation. I think you've got the leader of world class, and that's what's going to bring Britain up the tube.
Maggie Thatcher?
Yes.
Kinnock is a much more intelligent and sensitive man who leads the Labour Party, is
Rubbish.
he not? What's wrong with Kinnock?
He's a windbag, a Welsh windbag.
A Welsh windbag?
He talks too much. He talks all the time. He's not a man of any great weight. He has never had a job outside politics. He is really, but his ideological sort of position is based firmly in the student union politics of 1960, and he hasn't moved on nuclear disarmament or on the economy or on anything else. He thinks the state can do it.
And of course your Liberal Party was destroyed by some kind of sex scandal, was it not?
There was a little trouble that Mr. Jeremy Thorpe had with a boyfriend. That went on a long time.
And that's gone. They're down the tube.
They're down the tube. There is a sort of alliance of the centrist parties, which some people think is going to be a movement politics in the future in Britain. I doubt that.
Why did Scotland always stay Labour? Although none of you is really qualified to answer that question, I don't suppose.
I think it's historical baggage, really. That they
Scotland is
yes.
historical baggage.
Well, not Scotland, the country, but the people there actually come from organised Labour backgrounds. They are unwilling to change as fast as perhaps they have to in a modern world. And instead, they're still loyal socialist trade unionists.
That's right.
And then again, Jack, you see, most of the Scots who would vote Tory have moved south.
Yeah,
like you.
Yeah.
Well, the competition...
Move to get a better job.
The competition
like
is
you.
obviously much
That's
less in the south of England than it is in Scotland.
You know, if Hadrian had built that wall of line of pubs, none of them you would have come to.
Actually, you're talking about Kinnock. He has reunited the Labour Party, and he is more of a force than maybe we've given the impression. I think he's a Welsh windbag too. But they're much closer now in the polls to the Tories than they've ever been.
Who's Maggie's successor?
I would say Heseltine.
Oh, he was the guy who got in trouble over the Falklands.
That's right.
No,
Webster.
the answer to
that's Webster.
The answer to that is only Heseltine if she loses and loses badly.
Right.
If she wins, which is likely by 30 seats or so, her natural successor will probably be Kenneth Baker, the Education Secretary.
Two other British disasters we must cover. One, Northern Ireland.
Yeah, tragic.
Why can't you pull out of Northern Ireland?
It's part of the United Kingdom, and the people who live in Northern Ireland do not want the British government to pull out of that part of the United Kingdom.
I see there's a huge petition going to Maggie Thatcher asking her to scrap that agreement made with the government of Esser.
Right.
She won't scrap
She won't
that, will
scrap
she?
it. No.
No, she won't scrap.
The next Prime Minister of Esser might.
What about the Falklands? An exhibition of British machoism at vast expense which almost bankrupted the nation. Surely that could have been avoided, apart from sinking that.
Would you rather that we give in to the Argentinians?
Oh, I'm asking your
much-
opinion. I'm not asking questions. I'm
Very
asking
much like
questions.
Northern Ireland, because in Northern Ireland, the people of Northern Ireland belong to the United Kingdom and they're entitled to the protection of the army. The Falkland Islanders belong to the United Kingdom and they're entitled to the protection of the United Kingdom. And no country can just go across the water, whether it's 100 miles or 100,000 miles, and snatch a people away.
It may not be a pleasant thing to say, but I also think that the macho exercise did a lot for Britain. It made Britain begin to understand that they still do have muscles, that we're not, you know, the declining empire, that we can still kick.
Why did Maggie let the Americans use their English bases for that kind of pathetic raid on Libya?
Because she believed in tough action against terrorism.
Did you support her on that?
I supported her, yes, and I still do support her with hindsight. You have to hit terrorism hard.
I supported it with reservations, and I have deeper reservations now than I had at the time.
It's very difficult to identify who are the terrorists in the Middle East, of course, which group.
One last question. We are in a panic in this country about the epidemic of AIDS. You know, it's going to double and double and double and double. You don't have anything like the problem in Britain yet that we have in Canada. Why is that?
We will have, but we're taking tremendous precautions against it. The government is getting it right. It has launched a nationwide advertising campaign to alert people of the danger of AIDS. It is working. Condom ads on television, ads in the paper, editorials explaining the dangers of the disease. This is all prevention, and we're desperately hoping to break that succession to death.
This popular newspapers, they exposed the AIDS problem a long, long time ago. They got criticised for it because what have you called T&A journalism? But it was those newspapers who brought out AIDS in the first place and warned people about it. Maybe in this country the newspapers didn't do it.
Oh, no, but television and radio is doing it in this country, but the government is not doing very much about it, while your government has gone strong on it. Yeah. AIDS kills.
Some 40 million already spent and more to come.
What's the next big crisis? What's the next big stories you're looking for in Britain?
Well, the next big story for the world is the Middle East, but the next big story in Britain is the general election. Or who gets married in the royal family, you see. It really is a soap story there. The royal family's like Dallas and Dynasty and all that.
Go through them.
You know, well, you see, there's Andrew and Fergie, whether she's going to have a baby or not, and whether her bottom will get any smaller than 39.5 or larger. There's Diana and Charles with their two little children. It's a lovely story. It's whether Anne and Mark will stay together. It's whether the Duke and the Queen will have a public row because of their attitude over it. But I mean, it's got everything. It's better than Dallas or Dynasty, in fact.
And so are you gentlemen too, and my grateful thanks to Lloyd Turner, editor of The Star, to Nick Lloyd, editor of the Daily Express, and to Robin Esser, editor of the Sunday Express.
Thank you.
The great old days in Fleet Street. After the break. I'm in the law office of Alderman Jonathan Baker, and I'm on the 16th floor, 16 floors above Granville Street. And believe it or not, Granville Street and Granville Mall is under the microscope again. Just let me tell you, I think the biggest mistake ever made in downtown Vancouver was in allowing these people to put the shopping underground and leaving Granville Street deserted. And here is one of the men who was responsible for that fatal mistake, 20 years ago almost. Is that not right, Mr.
That's
Baker?
absolutely not true. I was a child. I was a child.
You were a social planner at the City Hall.
No. That was I was a mere babe.
Whose fault was it, putting all these stores underground?
That was done in 1966 by Council of the Day, and it was in order to get some development going in Vancouver.
As a social planner, would you agree with me, looking backwards, that it was a mistake taking the people off Granville Street and allowing it to be taken over from time to time by thugs, drug peddlers, with very unhappy businessmen?
It was a mistake to build Pacific Centre in the way they built it and the place they built it.
Now, what's the state of affairs now in Granville Mall? As we look down on it and watch all the tops of these gungy little messy buildings, I didn't realize Granville Street was quite in such a horrible condition.
Well, that's not just Granville Street. That's the entire portion of the downtown you can see consists mainly of old, shabby buildings that are ripe for renewal and redevelopment.
Well, can't people come in now and put the apartments on top of all these or demolish these buildings on the valuable property and revitalize properly, above ground, Granville Street?
Well, I think the zoning should be changed in order to encourage that. Right now, it's essentially a commercial retail zone, and there are, on the area of Granville Street right here, it's a 75-foot limit.
Height,
yeah, that's right. It gets higher on either side, but right along the street, it's 75 feet. So all of that should be changed, probably to encourage residential construction rather than simply retail.
So you, as chairman of this Granville Mall Planning Committee, are going to inject a bunch of new ideas for the public to love or to reject?
Well, I think we'll certainly investigate changes in zoning that may be necessary.
Have you got a raincoat?
I have a raincoat.
Let's go down and take a walk up Granville Street.
Okay.
Well, here we are, Jonathan. We're at Granville and Helmicken. We'll leave the other shabby part of the north side of Granville Street behind us. But this place seems to have been... This was in better shape before Granville Mall than since Granville Mall in '74.
No, I don't think that's true. As a matter of fact, the Chateau Granville here was built as a direct consequence of Granville Mall. The developers at the time thought that the street was going to be so upgraded that they committed that investment to that area.
Yeah, but that's the only new building at the north side from Nelson to the bridge, isn't it?
That's the only building, but I'd simply say the street is no different than it was 10 years ago or 20 years ago. It just hasn't changed.
Where does the north end of Granville Street come into in your potential changes on Granville from the bridge down the waterfront?
Well, first of all, we would look at rezoning or zoning changes for the entire length of Granville Street. As to any physical changes on the street itself, it would begin at Nelson, where the mall begins.
Now, this is where there's a 75-foot height limit.
That's right. There's a 75-foot height limit all along here, actually. And so, we'd have a look at that. But it's not merely the height limit. It's the use provisions of the zoning bylaw so as to, you want to allow more residential construction or encourage more residential
It's all commercial at the moment.
It's commercial and residential.
But what you envisage, therefore, are new stores with apartment blocks above them.
That's right.
High-rises.
Possibly high-rises. The form is really for the planners to look at, but the concept is that you'd have more residential.
Hi. What about this street here? We've got, what, 4 lanes of traffic here now?
Right now it's really 6 lanes of traffic.
Oh, yeah, 2 lanes of parking on either side.
That's right.
And you just re-blacktop this, that's all, and rezone it?
This we might not do anything with in the coming year. It's really the Granville Mall that is physically coming apart.
Okay, let's go and look. we'll chat up and we'll go and look at the Granville Mall physically coming apart, which sounds very depressing. Well, we're on the wall now, Jonathan, and look at the concrete. It's all split and broken to pieces. What happened here?
Well, the concrete is under tremendous pressure from these heavy buses that are starting and stopping. It's literally ripping it apart.
So therefore you're going to have to, one thing you're going to have to do is repave the whole of the mall.
Either it has to be repaved as it presently is, you knock out the concrete and repave it, or we change the configuration and have, say, 4 lanes of traffic, or it could be made as it once was, 6 lanes. But
2 points, but 2 points. So that was bad concrete. Somebody made a mistake putting down that kind of aggregate.
I don't know whether they made a mistake. That was the specifications for the concrete are such that it seems to be coming apart after.
How many millions did you spend to dress up the mall? You're now talking about maybe 4 lanes or 6 lanes.
It was $75,000 per block face at the time. It's $150,000.
3 million, about 3 million?
2.9 million was spent on the mall for 6 blocks in 1973 to 74.
Well, you haven't come to a decision yet about changing the configuration from Nelson to Granville to Hastings Street.
No, there's no. If there's a change in the configuration, it would only go to either Robson or Georgia, and no decision has been made on that.
Let's go and talk to Arnold, the pawnbroker. He is a pawnbroker, isn't he?
He's a pawnbroker.
Arnold, Jack Webster. And you know Jonathan Baker.
I sure do. Hi, how are you?
We're thinking of ripping up all that cracked concrete, replacing it, maybe putting in 4 or 6 lanes of traffic right through the mall. What do you think of that?
Well, the only thing should be done is to put it back the way it used to be, with the parking and with the open traffic. To do a cosmetic job of opening up the mall after 7 o'clock in the evenings or on the weekends is not the answer at all.
It's stupid. How's business?
It's not good.
Not so many.
It hasn't been good for quite some time.
Not so many thugs and druggies around.
Well, that's another story, I think, but it is better than it was, yes.
Did you vote for Jonathan?
Yes, I did, matter of fact.
You may have made a mistake. Nice to see you.
Bye.
Well, here's a gentleman just opening up this morning. Good morning, Don Smoke Shop.
Right.
How long have you been in business in Granville?
It's about 4.5 years.
How are you doing?
It's a little more slower than before.
Do you want the street changed?
Yeah, we need very much to change it.
What do you want?
Because we like to have traffic in both sides, so we get more people for business over here.
He's one of the people that stopped you from getting the traffic, but you've only been here 4 years.
You're slandering me, Jack. You're slandering me.
Issue the writ. Okay, I apologize. I apologize. So, as chairman of this committee, your basic thrust at the moment is not to change them all from Georgia Street to the water.
That's correct.
You might change it from here to the bridge.
Possibly, that's right.
So, and you might let all traffic through this narrow highway, this narrow road, all traffic.
Well, no, we wouldn't have all traffic. We'd have to repave it in this block here to let all traffic through. But this area is working fine. From Robson north, there doesn't seem to be any problem. And certainly we're not looking to making any big changes.
But you're not going to let cars on this section at all from here to the water?
That's right. We would not.
Not at all?
Probably not.
And the transit people would kick up the blazes anyway if you let a lot of extra traffic on other than buses and taxis.
Yeah, I think they wouldn't be too happy about it.
Okay, this is just the start of another circular discussion. You might get a decision out of the council 5 years from now?
Oh, no, we get a decision out of council on opening it to traffic within the next couple of weeks.
Thank you, Jonathan. I'm sorry about the weather this morning, but we both survived.
Well, we've managed.
Thank you. Premier Van der Zalm back from Holland, from Victoria tomorrow night, and 2 spokesmen one for Visa and one for MasterCard on interest rates. At 5 p.m. precisely.